Mahadev, Mahadev, Mahadev. We were speaking on Smara. Yes, am I right? In that, I think if I remember correct, in the last class, we were mostly concentrating on the power of consciousness. So, as I described about the purpose of his specifying the power of consciousness, which is greater. So consciousness, the power. What is that power? What is the power? What is the power of consciousness? It has been explained. Maharshi further says, our consciousness of our own existence is prior to the operation of our consciousness of the recognition of the space outside us. So you should know, first of all, before we continue, what is called the power of consciousness. If you don't understand that, you won't understand any of these following things. That's why I asked you that question. What is that power? Yes, I asked. In the last class, I think the whole class I explained only about the qualification of the power. Why it has been specified as power of consciousness. So that you should understand. The whole class I have spent on that. Our consciousness of our own existence. So when you understand that power, then you will understand what is called this consciousness of our existence. Otherwise, it is difficult to understand this. Only word meaning you can write down and you can listen. That's all. Our consciousness of our own existence, unless that power of consciousness is there, you will not be in a position to understand what is called the relativity between the consciousness and our existence. The consciousness of our existence is prior to the operation of our consciousness of recognition of the space outside. We are converging. So, before we identified the space outside us, we have understood the the consciousness of the self-existence. So, the space has come out. In other words, the space has come out from the consciousness of the self-existence. This also can be understood only because if you don't understand the power of consciousness, you won't understand this. It's impossible. It will be a blank. That's all. Only word meaning can be understood. So the existence, the consciousness of the self-existence. I'm not talking about the self-existence. She specified here also the consciousness of our self-existence prior to the consciousness of the awareness of the space, or the recognition of the space outside us. We discussed about the space. When we discussed about the space, we discussed the space as something which is necessary for everything. If I speak a word, for that word to travel and listen to reach to somebody, there has to be a space. For my thoughts to come, there has to be a space. Even though the space to listen and space to think in volume or in distance, it may be different, but there has to be a space. If there is no space, no projection can be done. The projection can be done only when space is there, is what? When the space has been explained. So here again, the consciousness of our existence, our own existence, is prior to the consciousness of recognition of the space outside us. The space outside us has come from the consciousness of the self-existence. Our own self-existence. Okay. So the self-existence is that the one which is Sukshma Bhava than the space. That is what. This is, again, I repeat again, this again will be understood only when the power of consciousness is understood properly. Because that power of consciousness, which is again qualifying here, the consciousness of our existence is. So when I have to understand the existence, I have to understand the consciousness. If I have to understand the consciousness, I have to understand the power of consciousness. So if you do not understand that, nothing is valid after this. Nothing can be understood. It can be, okay, word meaning can be understood, but you cannot perceive it. You cannot conceive them. In recognition of the space outside, so it is prior to that. What are we trying to do? We are gradually going the status prior to the status of now. So from each step, we are on the reverse process we are now. From Sthulata towards the Sukshmata we are traveling. So is why he said that our consciousness of our own existence is prior to the consciousness of our existence, consciousness of our existence prior to the space outside us, he said. Each word is very important. The space is outside us, he said. Space is not. Here he is classifying the inside and outside. Even though we had already discussed, I told you that earlier. Somebody might ask why, if there is a space, the space inside and space outside should be same. Then why Maharishi here specifically says that consciousness of the recognition of the space outside us. Here again, the necessity of power of recognition and of consciousness is necessary. Then only you will understand what is called this, why we set up consciousness of the self-existence and consciousness of the space outside. Consciousness of this existence, consciousness of the space outside. These are all, both are consciousness. You should remember one thing, that when we talked about the space outside and inside earlier, it was in the Sthula Bhava. When it was explained earlier, inside a pot there is a space. When the material broke, the object broke, the space inside and outside has become one. It was only the shape and form of perception which gave a feeling of separation of the space and the identity of the space inside and outside have been derived, perceived. Yes, that is in the Sthula Bhava. When we travel gradually, what happened? We came to the space, consciousness of the space, we said. We came to the space. After we came to the space, now we have come to the consciousness of the self-existence, he said. First he said the power of consciousness, which is recognized as the self-existence. The self-existence is the power of consciousness. The power of consciousness is called the self-existence. Is why he said power of consciousness which is recognized as the self-existence. Our consciousness, so then again, our consciousness of our self-existence is prior to the operation of our consciousness of recognition. Our consciousness of recognition, it is only a consciousness, the self-existence is only a consciousness, and the recognition outside the self-existence as space is also a consciousness. What are the powers of these two consciousnesses? One consciousness recognizes as self-existence, another consciousness recognizes the space outside the self-existence. If there is consciousness, why a separation of the space and the self-existence? Are you getting it? It's difficult. It's not that. That's why I said last class has to be known. That you don't remember now. If you don't remember now, you will not get this. Simple as that. So continuity has to be maintained. Is why one has to be constantly on that. If one is not constantly now, because so long it was easy to understand. Why? Because everything was in the Sthula Bhava, which could be seen, which could be witnessed, which could be felt. Now it is only for you only the word meaning. It's of no use. One has to experience it, conceive it. The capacity to conceive it has to be there. That's why the perception capacity has to be there, as the importance has to be there for that. For that, the bhava, the samarpana, the understanding, the true recognition, the realization has to come. 1,000 times you have to listen to those words of power of consciousness, the power. I think I must have repeated it number of times in the last session. So we must recognition of the space outside. It is the consciousness which is recognizing the self-experience, yes, or the self-existence. Existence is experience. Existence is also an experience. Existence means what? That something is existing, something is there. What is that something is there? It's an experience. Yes, that's why self-existence and self-experience. Then you will come to the self. Now we are only talking about the consciousness of the self-existence, consciousness of the self-experience, consciousness that relates to the self-existence, or making the self-existence known to you is that consciousness. Making one to recognize the self-existence. What is that which is making you identify the self-existence? Is that what is called as consciousness? That's consciousness which also has recognized the space outside you. That consciousness which is also recognizing now, which is as the self-existence. The consciousness is allowing the conscious. So both are the consciousness. Both have the power of, that's why it is identified as the power of consciousness. Even though it is a consciousness, it is the power of consciousness. In electricity, the light glows because of the electricity. The heater functions, produces heat because of electricity. The refrigeration produces cool air is also because of electricity. So power of consciousness of producing the heat, power of consciousness producing the cold, power of consciousness recognizing the self-existence, power of consciousness experiencing the space outside the self-existence. So Bhagavan says, with all this, to have all this experience, first of all we must exist. If we are not existing, none of these are possible. So we must exist. If the space is to be there, if the space has to be recognized outside us, one has to recognize oneself as existing. So we have to exist. When you exist, then only you will be aware of this self-existence. And the self-existence is compared with the space outside. When that consciousness is making you aware the space outside, the consciousness is making you aware that it is the self who is making the space outside as existing. If you are not existing, you will not be in a position to consciously be aware of the space external to you. So the awareness of the space external to you is identified as that. The inside, what I mean is that is called the self-existence. Is why here the inside and outside has been told. Here it is not the meaning of physical inside and outside. As in the Sthula Bhava, the inside of the pot and outside of the pot, where it has been divided, the external space and the internal space has been divided by a wall or a shape and form which appears to be dividing the space, Even though this is a manifestation, it has been given importance, the manifestation has been given importance, so we divided the space perceptionally. Even though a division of the space is impossible. But our perception, our consciousness did not have the understanding that it is an object projected in the space. Instead of understanding, it is dividing the space. Okay. If one can consciously experience that it is the object which is projected in the space and that which is not dividing the space, then only one can understand what is the meaning of the inside and outside. And what do you mean by inside and outside? And what do you don't mean by inside and outside? So here, that is why he said the power of consciousness is that which makes you aware that it is the self-existence and you are existing. And that consciousness is the one which is making you aware that there is a space outside. Here, when I say outside, it is not the meaning bahirgamante. It is not the meaning of the bahira. That it is not the outside. It's no. Here, even though we use the word outside, here we are understanding because they are all beyond the lower consciousness. They cannot be seen. It's not possible. It cannot be seen. So it's a perception. So here, even though Swamiji is using the word outside, the perception here, since we are describing about the higher consciousness, in higher consciousness, there is nothing called inside and outside. Everything is in it. So, but then how this division has been created is that only to make you understand that it is the consciousness that which is making you aware that there is a self-existence, and only since I am existing, I am in a position to identify the space. We said it is outside because in outside, when we say outside, we are able to see it. We are able to see it means what? Not physically seeing it there. There's nobody to see in the consciousness. It is only the experiencing. That's why I said self-experiencing. Unless that experience of the space outside. What is the space outside? It's an experience. It's not seeing. Are you seeing a space? It's not this. What do you see? Are you seeing a space? It's not. You are not seeing a space actually. You are only experiencing there is a space. Is it not? Are you seeing the word is traveling? So if you are not seeing the word is traveling, how do you know there is a space? It's a perception. It's only a logical conclusion. It is only an inference drawn because there is a delay in speaking and listening through an instrument when it is measured. There is a delay in delivering a speech and receiving a speech. There is a delay of the time. When the time has been identified, then they realized there is a space between. The space cannot be seen. It can be, it has been experienced by an instrument, has been identified that he spoke about few fractions of seconds before and few fractions of seconds after only you are listening. There is a delay between traveling. So that is called, unless so they concluded, or as a inference has been drawn, since there is a delay in listening when something is spoken and when listened, when there is a delay there, then an inference has been drawn. There has to be a space, otherwise how there is a delay? If the space is shorter, the delay is less. If the space is longer, the delay is more. So it has been relatively calculated based on the samaya. This is a perception. This cannot be seen. Can you see this? You cannot see it. Same way, the self-existence, the consciousness of the self-existence which recognizes the self is existing. How do you know that self is existing? That means something else other than the self is telling the self that you are existing. Who is and what is that which is recognizing the self, being the self there, is called the consciousness. That consciousness is the one which is telling you that self is existing. And the same consciousness is telling you that the space is existing outside you. It means here the outside is what? Outside is nothing but, when I say there's a boat, there is a boat, and there is, I am telling somebody, there is a boat and there is water below that. There is a boat, there is water below that, is it not? Water below that. What is the actual meaning of it? The boat is in the water. Same. Self-existence and the space outside. Where is the water? Water is outside the boat. Where is the boat? Boat is in the sea. Now you see. Who is in what? The one which is not permanent is in the permanent. So the self-existence is the permanency, and the space is only a relativity. Because of the self, because of the water is there, boat is able to be there. If the water is not there, boat cannot be there. But even if the boat is not there, water can be there. If the self-existence is not there, the space is not there. Even if the space is not there, the self-existence can be there. No? You're getting it? This is very difficult, yes, but these are all beyond the lower consciousness, these are on the higher consciousness. Word meaning will never reach you there. Understanding it by word will never can reach you there, can never make you realize it. They are not to be understood, as I told you in the beginning itself when I started about the higher consciousness from the lower consciousness. We said they are not to be understood. Don't try to understand it. If you try to understand it, you will remain only in the lower conscious level. So for the sannyasi, it is very necessary to grow beyond the lower consciousness and experience the consciousness of the self-existence, and consciousness of the space has to be experienced. I can tell you, like I had been talking since last 5-10 minutes, only on the consciousness. I can talk to you 2 hours on consciousness. Still, if you are trying to understand it, you will understand it. CONSCIOUSNESS can be understood, but consciousness cannot be understood. I hope you got what I mean. Is what I did not say this. It's not I support the conclusion derived by the great tapasvis and great jnanis. I accept it and I recognize it. It's not that my recognition is very important, necessary. I recognize it in the sense I am not endorsing it. Recognizing means I am not saying that I am endorsing it. I have no authority to endorse anything. I can only say that I am experiencing it. That the truth has to be experienced. Consciousness has to be experienced. Self-existence has to be experienced as the space has to be experienced. Space is not Akasha, the clouds. That's why we say Akasha means there. Where is Akasha? I told you the nursery rhyme also. I think I remember that. If you don't remember that, so that is space. As far as our consciousness is concerned, our understanding, that's called understanding. Where is the space? Space I cannot see. No? It's only an inference drawn. Since I am seeing the stars far away, I believe there is a space between these two. It's an inference. I don't see the space, but I believe there is a space. It's a belief. That belief comes, or the space comes, when you identify the distance or time. As I told you just now, when the speech is delivered and received, when the traveling time with an instrument has been calculated, that 1 second, fraction of a second, when the difference has been calculated and found out in the instrument, then we drew a conclusion. Since there is a time difference, there has to be a space in between. That's all. Whether there is space or not, we do not know. It's again an inference drawn. Because there is a difference in delivering the speech and listening to the speech, has a difference in time. That means a traveling time is there. This traveling time is possible only when there is a space to travel. So there is a space. We have to go in detail, otherwise you won't understand anything. Travel. Train leaves from one station to the other station, travels for 20 minutes, then you identify that there is a distance between this thing and there is a space between these two. Suppose you stay there only for 20 minutes and you have reached the other station. Is there a space? It's the second option. You are staying there only. But after 20 minutes you have reached there. Is there a space? There's no space. There's no space. Why? Why? Because you have no time difference. I know the time, even though here one is the time difference, second is that even though there is a time difference, you said that you are staying at the same place. You are not traveling beyond that. So what happens? Even though physically we derive it is not possible. Staying in the same place, after 20 minutes you are in the different place is not possible, is what the sthula bhava or sthula mana or sthula sharira or sthula jnanam makes you understand. If there is no, what is you understand? If there is no time difference, there is no space, is it not? If I have to travel from here to there has to be a time difference as well as there has to be a travel taking place, then only I will be there. But if the time is different and if you are static, you don't call it as traveling and you don't call it that there is a space in between. Am I right? Are you getting it? Okay. Then, how in your mind you are feeling the distance and the space between here and Himalayas? You are not traveling. You are static. You are static, but Himalayas is far, you say, is it not? Is it here? It's not here. In your thought, it is far. You have a distance there, but you are static. Time is closed, but you have a space. The first dimension, there has to be the subject. There has to be space, there has to be time difference, and there has to be object. Second option, there has to be itself, there has to be time, there has to be location, but there is no space. Third option, there has to be self, there is space, there is object, but time is not there. That's what Himalaya is there, distance is there. How much time did you spend to reach Himalaya? None of them are right. What do you understand now? They're all manifestations. I have told this in the beginning of the sessions of Upanishad. The time is only Kala. What is the time? Time is the Kala. It's not the time 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. So by deriving an instrument, deriving the speech is delivered from here now and has reached the other. From that, his derivation of that there is a space between listening and hearing Is it right or wrong? I don't know. I have already told all the options. Is there a time? Is there a space? The time is also measured based on the kala, we said. It is not the time what we are by clock, we are mentioning about it. Samaya. We have explained this Samaya when the Kala Chakra and Samaya, Kala and all has been very well explained earlier, so I think it will be another going back towards that. That is not possible now. So that's Samaya. Perception. So it's a perception. So the consciousness of the self-existence and the consciousness of the space outside the self-existence, both of them are due to the power of consciousness, and when you experience it, you will find where is the space and where is called the self-existence. Is the space in the self-existence or the self-existence is in the space? Where is it? Where is what? Is the space in the self-existence or self-existence in the space? I have already told. Where?
Space is self-existence.
That is why Sanat Kumara said, Smruti is greater than the space. Unless that Smruti is there, the space is not there. Unless the self-existence is there, the space is not there. So what is space? Space is only a conception of the sthula bhava. When it is, projected from the self-existence, then the space came. Everything is there. Yes, I told you hundreds of experiments, hundreds of examples to that. I have told you about the fragrance in the air. I have told you about the pixels of the photograph when it is enlarged and then today biometric tests are being done for identification. The eyes or any other thumbprint, things like that. What are they? From that they identify it is you. It's a sthula bhava. Biometric. It's a sthula bhava. Identifying a particular area, they identify you. Same thing has happened. The you. Actually, if they should know that it has been, the you is not only that. The you is not the eye. The you is not the lines of the thumb. But through the thumbprint, through the eye, they have derived a conclusion that it is you. So from the space, from the stulata, the sukshmata has to be understood. It is not possible. Because in stula bhava, everything has to be seen. So they have drawn an inference by seeing the biometric of the eyes, texture of the eye, color of the eye, or things like that, or the number of lines or the directions of the lines on the thumb, because it's supposed to be not changing. They derive that this should be this person. It's only a perception, that's all. It is right or wrong, logically. It is not necessary. It has to be right, to be honest. But it has been derived, that inference has been drawn. Since this is matching with that, it should be that, but one can do a plastic surgery and make it. So the inference is gone. The understanding is totally same way. That which is the sthula bhava, which is containing the sukshma bhava, but when you are in the sthula bhava, you are unable to identify and understand the sukshma bhava. Why? Because it's the sukshma bhava that is projecting the sthula bhava. So, as from that which is projected, the sukshmata cannot be derived. From the sukshmata, the sthulata can be derived. From the film, through a particular prism and light, it is projected in a big screen. And in the same process, it cannot be brought back to the film. But the films, any number of times it can be projected. You project it any number of times, but this cannot be brought back to the film. It's called a projection. From Sukshma only a projection can be done, and in a projection we can understand that these are all, whatever you are seeing there externally, they are all containing in that small tiny film. This cannot be seen. This has, through an inference, it has to be experienced, has to be understood. Can you really understand by your intelligence that all these are there in the film? By conviction we say, oh, these are all projected from the film, so it should be there in the film. That's why it is being projected here. But do you really know? You don't know. Because so and so has told, so and so science has told, so and so book has told, you are also telling it. Is it your knowledge that a bigger screen projection is from a smaller film? Is it your knowledge that it cannot be brought back to the Sukshmata? Is it your knowledge? No, it's not your knowledge. You are repeating it. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 has not been derived by you. It has been told by somebody and you believe that it is 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That's all. Is it your knowledge? Are you experiencing it? So long you are not experiencing it, it's only sort of, this is called understanding. You understood what I mean by understanding? When you touch the flame, the heat that you are experiencing is not the same heat is experienced by other person, even though both of them they say it is hot. The hot by you, the hot by the other man is totally different. This is called experiencing and understanding. It's called existence of the self and space. That is not understood by way of intelligence. Right? Is it right? This is called experiencing. One is experiencing. The higher consciousness can only experience. It is not measured. What is it? The temperature of the flame is same. The temperature of the flame is same, 1000 degrees centigrade. But you touch and I touch, it is different. The one who is cooking, I always tell this example earlier also I have told. The one who is constantly cooking or doing some jobs, with the heat, like a blacksmith or somebody, they can hold a hot metal better than a person who is not regularly doing it. Yes, even though the heat is same. For this man, also the heat is 100 degrees centigrade, 1000 degrees centigrade. For the other person also, as far as the measure is concerned, both are 1000 degrees centigrade is called the understanding by intelligence. If the flame temperature is X, why one should experience x plus and why one should experience x minus. When it is x minus, then only you are able to hold it. You are working in kitchen. People who are working in kitchen, they can handle the hot ones. Sometimes very, but if I go and touch, even from so much of distance, I start feeling the heat. Not used to. Which one is right? Temperature is same for you and me. Why you are not? You call it as experienced because you are got used to that. That's all. If you got used to, that means when you get used to it, that means what is that used to? It's an experiencing. That used to cannot be understood. It's experiencing. Unless that is experienced, you will not be able to really understand it. Not understanding the temperature. By measure 1000 degrees means you cannot touch it, but one is touching it. Because one has experienced it. The one who has experienced it can touch it. The one who has not experienced it cannot touch it. That is the consciousness. What is that consciousness? The result of that experiencing is called the consciousness. That only will make you understand the real meaning of the existence and the space outside the existence. Now, space outside the existence means a differentiation has been derived here. As I told you, it is like the boat in the water and boat and the water. So, the consciousness is identified first as the self-existence and the space. Since the consciousness is more towards the self, how do you say that it is that and it is this? This is a matter of study. If it is boring, we should stop it here. It's a matter of study. How do you say it is that and it is this? What is that? That and this. Very simple. It's a simple meaning. That is far from you, this is nearer to you. Why don't you say that? That means far from you and this means closer to you. That is why consciousness said. Consciousness said that self-existence, and the same consciousness said space outside. So where is this consciousness? It is in the self. Since the consciousness is in, instead of, that's why I did not explain this earlier. You must experience it. Since the consciousness is in the self, the consciousness of the self, remember, the consciousness of the self-existence will always say the space is outside. Is why Maharishi has mentioned here that consciousness has identified the self inside and the space outside the self-existence he has mentioned. You must be wondering why I am hair splitting all this. I have to, because that's what is Upanishad. I know this may not be very useful for you to lead your normal way of living. But of course, yes, when you go into detail, it also helps a grihastha. As I always told, sannyasa is meant for the grihastha. It's the grihastha who has to understand the sannyasa. Sannyasi need not to understand sannyasa. It's the grihastha who has to understand it. So all these documents are made by tapasvis and jnanis for the people who are trying to travel towards the sannyasa from the grihastha. They have to understand this. Unless this basic principle is understood, we will not know how you are projecting your feelings, how you are understanding what is called as kashta, what is dukkha, what is love, what is experiencing, what is life, what is called living. These have to be understood based on these principles. It's not that it is not relevant for people who are living materialistically. It is very much relevant only for them. The one who has understood about the self, he need not to understand this. He has to experience it. The problem with materialism, the problem with the normal human beings with their emotions, they are only concluding things based on their own experiences, on the sthula bhava, without experimenting on that, with absolute expectations and imaginations that there is tomorrow, so I will do it tomorrow. Based on that only, the life is going on, which has no basis, which has no bearing. Since the basis itself is not there, how one can lead the living? Impossible. To lead a life, there has to be a bearing. There has to be an understanding. There has to be a basis with which we have to live. Today we don't have any basis. ठीक है, कल जो होगा देखा जाएगा. When we don't understand anything at a point of time, we say that either we say leave it to God, or we say कल जो होगा देखा जाएगा. When it comes, we see, because we do not know what we are supposed to do. So in order to lead the life in the grihastha avastha, in order to think, the pattern of thinking, the pattern of perception, the person of ideas, idealism and ideology, and also implementation of that idealism, ideology, and also to have the results of the ones which are absolutely truth, experiencing the results of the truth which doesn't create a karma phala, whereas in experiencing the untruth will always create a karma phala. Karma phala here, what I mean is that unless that one experiences the truth, till the time you are experiencing the truth, the continuation of the experiencing keeps on going, is called the number of lives and living. Adi Shankara said that the Chandala has to appear to make him conscious of the existence of the Lord, presence of him. As the Chandala was present for making him conscious, or his consciousness identified Lord in Chandala.
Consciousness.
So the consciousness makes itself aware, out of circumstances and situations and out of the purity that it has derived. If the consciousness is not experiencing the purity, that means purity in the sense that it has not travelled from the stulata to sukshmata, it will not be in a position to recognize the sukshmata. That is why here the Maharshi, I am just relating all the things to make you understand that how the word it has been used. It's not simply written a sentence that the consciousness has identified, recognized the self-existence, and then the same consciousness has identified, recognized the space outside. It's like this. The consciousness is identified. Is it the situation, is the Chandala that made him recognize consciousness? Then why did he understand before the Chandala came? If it was consciousness. Chandala's presence was necessary to evoke that consciousness which was hidden and was not experiencing it. Consciousness cannot be created by the presence of the Lord. Consciousness can be made use when the presence of the Lord is there. Before that, that consciousness was not necessary in the Sthula Sharira of Shankaracharya. Why? Because he was only connected with the Sthulata, he was not trying to understand the Sukshmata. But as soon as the Chandala came, that consciousness which was evoked in him, and it is already evoked and present there, could recognize the self-existence in Chandala. And the space outside Shankara is the space outside in Chandala, from Chandala. Who identified? Shankara's consciousness identified that Chandala is the Lord, that I, Shankara, did not identify it earlier, but now I have identified. Both are the consciousness of the Adi Shankara Acharya. But this evoking could be done only when in presence of Chandala. Why? Because Chandala is the Sukshma Bhava. What is Chandala? Chandala is the Sukshma Bhava of the consciousness of Adi Shankara. Is why in presence of Chandala, the Sukshmata of the consciousness of Adi Shankara could be revealed. What is the ultimate result? The ultimate result is that that consciousness has projected, has converged the Sthulata of Adi Shankara into Sukshmata of Ishwarata in Chandala, not Chandala. This is called, he experienced the Lord. He has not seen the Lord in Chandala. He experienced the Lord in Chandala. Who experienced? His consciousness. Where is his consciousness? In the presence of Chandala, in presence of the Ishwaratva in Chandala, in presence of the consciousness in Chandala. That consciousness in Chandala is the Sukshma Bhava of the Purusha, Ishwaratva. The consciousness in Shankara is also the Sukshma Bhava of the Purusha. The situation when it arose, the consciousness of the Purusha was present in the consciousness of the Sthula Bhava of the same consciousness. You getting it? In the Sukshma Bhava of the same consciousness, that Sthula Bhava of the same consciousness which is known as Shankara has been engulfed into the Sukshma Bhava of the Ishwaratva in Chandala. like the boat in the sea. So, I already told this. But technically, deriving the... See, you have to... If you don't understand the subject, you won't be able to explain this. What is that? This is how it has to be derived. And it has to be understood like this. Otherwise, it will always remain the boat and the waters. The boat and the sea, when I told you, you have identified the boat and the water. No doubt about it. But you never can understand boat in the water. That cannot be understood. Because it's an experience. Because what is boat? Boat is a part of the water. Here. How the boat has come? Because the water is there, the boat has come. Because there is higher consciousness in the Chandala, which is Purusha, the consciousness. The Adi Shankara's consciousness, which is also the representation of the Purusha, has been engulfed into that consciousness, the same consciousness. The Shankara, which is a projection of that consciousness, has been engulfed into the consciousness which is known as Purusha. Is how identification, that is why he always said that recognized. Why the word always, he says recognition, recognition, recognition. Cognizance of that, because it is separate, we say recognize, recognize. Cognizing it. Once it is recognized, it's a cognition that has taken place. Cognizance that taken place, which is called Tadatmikata. Well, it's wonderful. It's a beautiful way of Upanishad explaining about the self-existence. So what is the self-existence? Understood by this. So Bhagavan, we can keep on talking, but unless we are experiencing it, as I told you, it will be a story and can be okay. This self-existence which we feel now is where am I? I don't know. So our consciousness of the self-existence is prior to determining the factor of the consciousness of the vast expanse that we call it as space. Yeah, that we understand. We have already understood by these statements that unless there is a self-existence, the vast expanse of the space cannot be existing. They are only there because I am there. The Ishwaratva in Chandala, the consciousness of the Ishwaratva in Chandala is there, is why Adi Shankara is there. Not the other way around. Even though in the story we say he has experienced. This, prior to determining of the factor of the consciousness, that means before that vast space existed for us, before the vast space existed for us, that means before the vast space was projected, the self-existence was there. That's how the self-existence could project that space which I have explained for 2-3 classes. Now, where is it gone? Suddenly gone inside, hidden in the womb. Garbha, that's why it is Garbha. That's why it is secret. These knowledges are secret, rahasya. It is not revealed. So even now, for people who have not experienced it, it's still a rahasya only. It's not revealed. Can only be seen that, okay, there is a lock, there is a locker, and there is a lock, and there is a key. With the key, the lock can be opened, is the knowledge. Unless it is opened, we do not know what you call it as opening, what you call it as closing. Once it is opened, where the closing word has come, the closing word has come because there was a status called open. That open which we try to hide it, the word closing has come. But the fact is what? Even when it is closed, the behind that closed is always open. The truth is what? The truth is it is open. Closed is a perception. Closed is an imagination. Alright? These have to be interpreted in that way, then only the experiencing can be done, otherwise experiencing cannot be done. And experiencing is not easy, it's not anybody's fault. I do agree with that, because the higher consciousness, if one understands the higher consciousness, probably all this explanation would not be necessary. As I told you, for a great saint, one word, He Bhagavan Praviditi, is good enough. For others, even 1,000 pages of explanation may not be enough. 1,000 janmas may not be enough for one to become aware of the consciousness, but for some, one janma is more than enough. They all depend upon the awareness that how what did I say? The utilization of that consciousness in presence of the Purusha, it has to happen. In order to make it happen, this consciousness has to be kept away from the preoccupations of the misunderstandings of the sthula bhava. Then only this can be, tadatmikata can be created with the existence, with the consciousness of the existence. It's possible because the similarities should be absolutely matching. Adi Shankara's consciousness was absolutely that. So the consciousness in Chandala, which is Ishwaratva, could be related with that immediately, and Layam could be taken place because there is no difference between these two. So Layam could be taken place. So there was no projection Sthulata. Both were Sthulata of different consciousnesses. But the consciousness was one. The consciousness was one, both consciousness, which even though it is wrong usage, both consciousness is a wrong usage. But for understanding this consciousness and this consciousness being one, it has become one. But that projected two different sthula bhava. One as Chandala, one as Adi Shankara. They are the same consciousness. If we understand this, we've experienced this, you understand the whole life and living. Finished. Is it different? That's why I said, he is an incarnation of Bhagavan, they said. In sthula projection, there can be different objects and objectives there. These objects are not different from that. Each and every object has got the same consciousness, is what one has to experience. But just I'm telling this because these are the ways how to make the lower consciousness understand. That's why I'm deriving all these principles so that you get an idea of it. So experiencing whenever one wants makes it easier, at least. So is it clear now? Yes, how the recognition of the sthula bhava by the consciousness. So he said here, what are we saying here? That the space is existing only because we have travelled from space to this Mara. Smruti is important because from the Smruti only you have projected the simple words. From Smruti only you have projected the space. Is why the Smruti is important than the space. It's not that space was not there. Smruti is important than the space because space is the sthula bhava projected by the self-existence. That consciousness, that is why he said this self-existence is prior to determining of the factor of the consciousness of this vast expanse that we call space. You have to go. Going into the Sushmana is difficult. As I told you, we do not know how to do it. We know only how to go into Stulata. We can go into pleasure and worries and sadness very easily. Then we can go into happiness. We can project ourselves into physical pleasures than the Shradha and Bhakti Bhava in it. About Shradha, again, it's a big subject again, Shradha. Unless that Shradha is there. What is Shradha? Shradha is not concentration. Shradha is tadatmikata. It's not understood, Shradha. It's not an action. It's an experience. So smara does not merely mean a kind of memory, which is common meaning of the item. It is something superior to it. This self-existence which we feel as the self-existence which we feel as identical with our own consciousness, the self-existence which we feel as identical with our own consciousness, which is what is meant by the word smara or smruti. Again, this also has to be very clearly understood. The self-existence. Now what we have learned now, the self-existence is that what we feel as identical to our consciousness. This I have already explained to you by telling Adi Shankara's consciousness and Chandala's consciousness. I have already told you that he has felt this is his consciousness, this is his consciousness. What is it? He said that it is identical. We feel it is identical. We feel it is identical with our own consciousness, the self-existence. Because it is the consciousness who has told there is a self-existence. It is the consciousness who has told it is a space that you have projected from you. You means self-existence. So you think it is the consciousness which is your consciousness, whose the self-existence is thinking, that consciousness which is making me identifying as the self-existence, and also telling me that the space projected from me is my consciousness, is identical to this. If we ourselves are not there, there is no question of space being there. Smara is therefore surely greater than Akashao, Smaro, Vavaha, Akashat Bhuya. If any person is there who has lost consciousness of his or her own existence, there is no question of space or anything else for that matter. We say no, who lost his mind, who lost his consciousness, the one who lost his consciousness. Yes, he doesn't have his body, he doesn't have the relatives, he doesn't have the house, he doesn't have the space for the house, he doesn't have space for the space, he doesn't have Akasha, he doesn't have Bhumi, he doesn't have anything. Who has lost the consciousness. The one who is under anesthetic effect. In our modern language is easier to understand. You are in anesthesia. You don't recognize anybody. You don't recognize yourself. Your existence is also not felt, not experienced. Whether somebody is there or not, it's also not. Even if your brain doesn't get oxygen for 1 minute, few seconds, it's I think maximum 1 minute, or maximum few, how many? 40 seconds or 50 seconds. You become unconscious and fall down at that point also. Within few seconds of time, that your great recognition power is just lost in 4 seconds, that's all. Because your consciousness is not there. The man is dead, we say. When he is dead, the recognition of existence is not there. Recognition, neither the space, nor world, nor science, not earth, not spirit, no earthquake, no earth, no earthquake. Nothing is there. Everything is there. So who is making you aware that you are there? It's a consciousness. Unless that is there, none so far we have explained, none of them are there. No meaning, no love, no affection, no sorrow, no attachment, no worries, no acquisition, no possession, no possession, no position and no position, no existence, no non-existence, no sleeping, no waking up, no power, no money, no wealth. If that consciousness is not there, nothing is there. They are all projections from one after other. Sthulata, ultimate sthulata, absolute gross body. Small consciousness goes away from you. All the sthulata that has been projected is all vanished in a fraction of a second. So, where is it all gone? Are they not there? They are there. Where are they? They are in the Sukshma Bhava. It is there. They are no more necessary. The Sthula Bhava, we think the Sthula, the subtlest, the grossest form, that what you are possessing today is the grossest form, is the truth and reality. And we are attached with that and experiencing that grossest form, which is I recognized, which I told you, which I recognized, which I experienced, which I explained to you, that it is all false. They say that. The basis of your living is false, so you are getting, the results are also all false only. Because the basis is wrong. Basis can be right only when, as I told you, the Tadhatmikata has to come with the consciousness of that existence and consciousness of the Purusha. So if any person is there who has lost consciousness, there is no question of space, no question of hearing or thinking, and no question of understanding. No function of any kind of worthwhile will be possible if there is no self-consciousness. If we are not aware of our own existence, what is the good of thinking about space and fire and anything else? Panchabhutas, Panchakoshas, Panchendriyas. Everything is gone into dilution. If we do not understand, we do not experience the consciousness of the self-existence. So our self-consciousness, the self-consciousness of everyone is superior to space. And it is that which determines the character of the space. This is very important again. Are you in a mood to listen more? Or we stop? I am getting a feeling that you are not wanting to listen. So you understand this now, whatever has been told. I'll be continuing with the sentence that it is the self-consciousness which in turn self-existence is what determines the character of the space.